Yeah. I was telling this story the other day. So I was born in 1964. So the first year I was born, I was born actually in Ohio. But as soon as I was born, my parents moved to West Virginia, and we lived in a log cabin. And my mom used to point it out and tell people, and I used to cry when I was a kid because I didn't want them to know that I had lived in a log cabin.
Marshall in the middle. The professor. It's the professor. Look at you.
What's going on, man?
Oh my, it is so good to see you. It is so good to see you. How are you?
I agree. It's been a long time since we talked.
I know it's been, it really, because I don't I don't think that I like actually got back face to face with you after we left in the 90s somehow. I just don't remember.
Mm-mm. No, I don't. We both blew our separate ways, and
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. You were, dude, you are such a hero of mine. You taught me so much about just being a leader, making fair decisions, setting up standards that were achievable yet tough, talking about focusing on the goal, which was to graduate students and not just guard the jumpmaster wings and stuff. We are here to teach all of the putting together the manuals that we did.
oh, good Lord.
Right?
That Aesop edition 4 still gives me nightmares.
Oh, wow. We were digitizing it. We were colorizing
Yeah, yeah.
it. We
That's what I tell people. I'm like, we typed that thing. I mean, that was the first one. After that, it was like cut and paste. But that first one was, ooh, that was a beast.
It was rough, and you gave me all these folders, and we had these little subcommittees that updated each chapter, but somehow it ended up in my lap, and I'm sitting there typing it. I'm doing a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
typing and
I remember
scanning
reading
in.
stuff. I remember reading stuff to about midnight and then bringing it in and give it to you next morning. I'm like, okay, type this up, man.
Yeah, it was wild. It was great times. I'll never forget that. Take me back though, if you don't mind, to the early days. Tell me about your childhood. I know you're from West Virginia. I know, I see your family posts and stuff. I love your presence on Facebook. And tell me more about it, you as a kid. When were you born and where and stuff?
Facebook was pretty cool when I mean, social media for all the negatives it brings. When that stuff first came out, I was getting in contact with buddies that I hadn't talked to with like basic training. I mean, for years. So that's one of the cool aspects of social media that we've been able to keep in touch with people like that. Um, but yeah, you want to, when I was born, that's a long time ago. We're getting old, bro.
I know, isn't it wild to think about, putting out it's just like it's so far in the past that
But
it's
the
like
world's changed so much.
I
Really, that's
know.
what the deal is. Yeah. I was telling this story the other day. So I was born in 1964. So the first year I was born, I was born actually in Ohio. But as soon as I was born, my parents moved to West Virginia, and we lived in a log cabin. And my mom used to point it out and tell people, and I used to cry when I was a kid because I didn't want them to know that I had lived in a log cabin when I was a kid. It was now it's like like an arts and crafts store. The lady, built like a modern part to it and, around it or whatever. But the log cabin's still there. And a couple of years ago, I stopped by there and I was like, yeah, I used to live in this house when I was a kid. But yeah, I used to cry when I was like 9, 10 years old. My mom would like tell everybody, yeah, we lived in that log cabin right there. Because I mean, it just looked like some old barn out in the woods that just was horrible. So growing up was weird because I split my time between just outside Cleveland, Ohio, and a lot of time in West Virginia because that's where my parents were from. And my parents actually moved back there my senior year in high school. And then we actually lived there when I was in fifth grade. I actually did a year of school in West Virginia. But we were just poor. They were just poor folks scratching out a living. I always tell folks my parents didn't live life; they survived it. Um, when I joined the army, we were living in a house that it was like a little 4-room house that had no plumbing or no running water. So when I joined the army, I like hit the lottery.
You were like got your first pair of shoes when you
Yeah, that's what I
joined.
was telling you. I was like, I can remember still standing in line and they're sizing, how they size you up in basic and they give you 2 pair of boots, they give you low quarters. And I had never had that many pairs of shoes in my life.
so so did were you good in school,
Yeah,
as
I
a
was, I was,
kid?
I was, I was better than my grades. But I worked a lot to kind of help my family. Um, so school was just something I had to get through. My dad told me I had to graduate, so getting a high school diploma was just something I had to get through. But I blew off a lot of homework, a lot of assignments because, when a lot of times when I left school, I'd go to work and do something.
What
But
kind
yeah, I
of
was
thing?
better than my grades. Math was always natural to me. Now I don't know where to put a comma in a sentence, but equations make sense to me. They just do. They always have.
That's awesome. I think that's great. Tell me about someone that influenced you when you were young.
Primarily my dad. I mean, he taught me everything. I hung out with him. I worked with him. We went hunting. He was a big hunter, which is funny. I always tell people, my mom hated guns. She hated them. And my dad had a shotgun behind every door in the house, but she would never touch him. Like she'd be sweeping the floor and she'd like, Daniel, come here. And I'd run in there and I'd move that gun so I could sweep the floor. She would never touch him. She hated him, but she loved my dad. And he was a hunting fanatic. So he had them everywhere. But it was funny but yeah, I mean, when I was younger, everything was just hanging out with my father. I mean, I can't name another person that probably had more of an influence on me than my dad. My dad actually talked me into joining the army. Um, and boy, my mom didn't talk to him for like 2 weeks because she didn't want me to join. But my dad was like, because I got 4 brothers or 3 brothers and a sister, so there's 5 of us, and I'm the oldest. And my dad was like, these hills, they're not for you. They're fine for your brothers, and all my brothers still live there. But he's like, you need to go. You need to go somewhere and do something. So he took me. He actually drove me to the recruiting station and um, got me started and going and whatnot. But yeah, my mom was mad at him for that, boy.
I remember a time when I did something that I kind of disappointed my dad. I thought I disappointed him. Do you remember a time maybe like that? Maybe you might have disappointed your dad or disappointed someone.
You know, I just wanted to make him. I always wanted to please him. I think probably um, he probably would have wished I wasn't walking around, making sure. Well, I wonder how my dad's going to think about this. But he used to always tell us kids, when you're in the house, you act all crazy and do stupid stuff you want. But when you step outside this house, you better make sure you understand it. You better act like you got some sense because well, and when I learned this was, I was in West Virginia and I was walking down this dirt road, and this old farmer was standing out there, and he's like, "Hey, son, who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm Daniel Bennett." And he goes, "Well, I don't know any Daniel Bennett." And I said, "Well, I'm Joe Bennett's oldest son." And then he goes, "Oh, okay." So from then on, when I would introduce myself to people, I'd always give them my dad's name because down there, he 5 counties knew who he was. So I learned real quick that, slinging my dad's name got me a little more farther in life than what what I was ever going to get on my own.
Tell me what made your dad famous. What did he do
Oh,
that
he
he
was
was
just
so
one.
well
He was
known?
just a good guy. I mean, he would if you needed a hayfield cut, he'd come cut it for you. If you needed a roof fixed, he'd come fix it for you. He didn't expect anything from you or anything like that. He was just one of those guys that if you needed something, he was going to help you. I have seen my dad literally take his shoes off and give them to another person. I've seen him do it.
That's awesome.
It blew me away. But
That's
that was
awesome.
the type of person he was.
Tell me about you're 6'8",
6'5".
6'5".
Yeah.
Were you a tall kid?
Yeah. I was tall, lanky, goofy. I haven't grown since 8th grade. I've been the
Oh
same
wow.
height. Yeah.
Oh wow.
So I mean, it was hard for me to find clothes growing up because, again, the world changed. It's not like it is now. You just go on the internet and I can find something with 38-inch sleeves. Back then, your shirt went about right here, and that was about it.
The Sears and Roebuck catalog only had Husky.
Yeah, there you go. uh, it's funny. I may be jumping a little bit ahead here, but I remember this story for basic training, and I'll never forget this kid's name. His name was Tim Pearl, and he was in my platoon in basic. So, I had never ate as like I ate in basic training. I mean, 3 meals a day, as much food as you wanted to eat. Plus, I was exercising. So I put on about 20 pounds in basic. I mean, I left there a lot bigger than when I went there. But, I had one pair of pants when I went to basic training, and I outgrew them around the waist. They were like a 30-inch waist, and I was like a 32. So uh, it was the day before graduation. They gave us a pass to go to the PX. I remember I went to the PX at Fort Sill, and I was with Tim Pearl. And we walked in there, and I go, "Hey, man, I got to get a pair of jeans." And he walks up to me, and I walk up to there's a table there, and I pull up the jeans off the table, and I hold them up in the air, and then I put them down to my waist because I had never been to a store to buy clothes. My mama had always went to garage sales, rummage sales. That's how we bought clothes. So you'd hold them up to your waist to see if it went around, and then you buy. And he's standing there and he's watching me, and I totally give him props. I mean, this is another 18-year-old kid, and he's like very tactful about this. He goes, "Hey, you do know you can try those on?" And I go, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "Well, they got these rooms over here, and you can put them on and make sure they fit before you buy them." And I was like, "Really?" So I went in the dressing room and put on a pair of pants and made sure. He goes, "How do you fit?" I was like, "Yeah, they're okay." And we bought it. But that was the first time that I had done something like that on my own because, it was just funny
So,
because I rarely bought clothes out of a store.
so what was it like showing up in the Army, and going to basic and all that?
Oh, I was one of those really, I was a quiet, probably, basic was very physical, which, I wasn't at the time. I think I had the lowest score on the PT test in the platoon when I got there. I mean, I was fun. The 2 mile run, I killed that, but push-ups and sit-ups I was not strong at all. So I had a very weak upper body. I was doing a lot of remedial PT and stuff like that. I mean, at the end of basic, I mean, they're good. Drill sergeant's going to make sure you're going to, I mean, I did more push-ups than what I could count. Every time we were on break, I was doing push-ups, flutter kicks. What was that? Drill sergeant Banks had me doing one exercise up. It was kind of like burpees, I guess now, up downs. Or I was constantly doing something.
Did you ever get in trouble in basic or say something you shouldn't have or anything like that?
No, no, I was pretty much a rule follower all through basic. I was just trying to keep my head down. Well, it's hard too because you're the tallest guy in the platoon almost. I think there might have been one kid about my height, so you stick out like a sore thumb. And I had a drill sergeant Contois. He was about 4'10", and he liked the. I guess he just liked smoking the big guys or whatever. But yeah, he was a beast. I mean, I was scared of him. If he was to walk in here right now, I'd just drop and start knocking him out.
Oh my gosh. So you're a 13 Bravo, is that right?
Yeah, I've been a 13 Bravo pretty much. I did a little stint for a couple of months as a 13 Fox, but man, because this was back when they had those big reenlistment bonuses if you went to a shortage MOS. And 13 Fox has always been a short MOS because you're basically working two jobs. You're with the artillery and you're walking with the infantry. So That's a rough job to be in the Army. It probably still is, I'd imagine. Um, I did a short stint with as that to think about re-enlisting, but I really liked. I was good at it too. That was probably why I liked it, because I was really good at it. Um, but I stayed at pretty much 13 Bravo my whole career. Yeah.
What were you good at about being a 13 Bravo?
I had a way, I guess, of bringing a team together, because, to get a cannon in firing order, you're going to have, you got to, one, you got to be fast, and two, you got to do it right. Um, and you always got 6 or 7 guys. Well, on the 198 howitzer, where I learned, we had 11 guys. You could shoot that with 8 or 9, I guess, but yeah, I just, I was willing to work as hard as everybody else. So, when you're willing to do that, I guess if people are willing to follow you when they're doing it,
So
but I was,
I bet you were a quiet private too, right?
oh
You
yeah.
got to your unit. Tell me about being a private at your new unit. Where'd you go?
You know what? This is interesting, because a lot of people, when I talk about this too, a lot of people don't know about this. So I joined in 1983, and I was in something called a cohort unit. You ever heard of that? Yeah, yeah. Very few people have heard of those cohort units. And it was, a big social experiment the military had, because you had all these Vietnam guys with experience. And, the big problem in Vietnam was a lot of guys would rotate out, and guys would look out for themselves. And, they would get with the guys who got there with. And so a cohort unit, everybody I went to basic training with, it was actually 2 platoons of us. We went to basic training together, and then we all went to 7th ID out in Fort Ord, California at the time. And we were to stay 3 years together as this one unit. The NCOs were there, the cadre were trained up, they met us there, platoon sergeants, section chiefs, all that good stuff, gunners. But as far as the E1 through E4 slots, we were all basically E1s at the same time. And it was good. I liked it, but simply, again, because I kind of excelled at it. I actually went to a board to get E2. I had to compete. Yeah, it was like 10 of us because the unit got so many waivers each month of, promote guys to E2, but they couldn't promote the whole unit until you got to, I don't know, 6 months or something like that. Then you could promote everybody. But if you wanted to be one of the fast trackers, well, what the cadre came up with, or what the NCOs came up with, is, well, we'll just have a promotion board, and if whoever the best 2 is, that's who'll get E2. So I actually went to the board for every rank I pretty much got: E2, E3, E4. Um, but it was a good thing for me personally, because I went to basic training with these guys, and then we went to the unit with them. So I kind of knew everybody. You don't have to learn everybody, every time. We all knew each other. We knew what our strengths were. We knew what our weaknesses were. We knew what we liked, what we didn't like. We knew who got along and who didn't get along, that type of thing. And then it was funny, because about a year and a half into that, this was when, because the Fort Ord 7th ID wasn't light at that time. So then the Army come up with this whole, we're going to make 10th Mountain light. We're going to make 25th ID light. We're going to make 7th Infantry light. So then we went from 11-man crews to 5 and 6-man crews. So they PCS'd a lot of soldiers away from our unit. And, looking back on it, I know this is what happened. The NCOs sat down and go, okay, I'm keeping these 6 guys, and we're, PCSing these 5 guys. Yeah. And, so really what we had was a really sharp unit, because basically you took 100 privates, you picked the best 50, and that's what you kept. So it ended up being a really positive experience for me. So positive that when I re-enlisted, I stayed there for the next cohort unit to rotate in. And but that was when I eventually went to the 82nd, though, because my re-enlistment, I was on a 4-year enlistment. Most of the guys in the cohort unit were on a 3-year enlistment. So I just stayed there, did cadre for about a half a year, and then re-enlisted, went to division.
So what was the draw to go to division? Did you know you wanted to jump out of airplanes?
I had not a clue. I was sitting out in the field, and I had this captain, Evan Blanco. I'll never forget him. Really good guy. A little wild, I think. Okay, but he was an airborne ranger, and he had one of those ranger tabs that he always sewed on with white thread to show that he went through in the wintertime. Yeah, real stud of a guy. So we're out in the field one day, and we're getting, we're coming. I think maybe I came in the window for reenlistment or something. Whenever that happens, the chain of command starts talking to you. You know what I mean? So he comes up to me and he goes, "I want you to reenlist, but I want you to reenlist and leave here. Okay? I want you to go to 82nd." I was looking at him like, he goes, "You're really good, but you're not getting challenged here." He goes, "You need to go somewhere where you're getting challenged." And he goes, "I would recommend you go to 82nd." And I'm like, "Hey, sir, I appreciate it. I'll think about it." And I ended up doing it just because he was one of those type of commanders that, you listen to what they had to say. And he knew he was going to lose a good NCO, but that's just the way he was. He was willing to, he knew he was going to do what was best for you, not what was best for him, which is, what all good commanders, I think, do anyway. But yeah, that was the reason why I went. I mean, just because he told me I should.
Tell me about jump school. Did you close your eyes when you jumped out the first time? Did you?
You know what? I did not, because I tell people I was more afraid the second jump than the first jump because I knew what to expect. That first jump, first of all, it was hot. I went in April and it wasn't close to summer, but it was getting hot. We had, two NCOs in each stick, and then there was privates for days. And them cadre, I was an E5 at the time. The cadre there, they really depend on the NCOs going through the course to keep all those privates in line because, they would tear the buildings down every weekend if they let them. So I really enjoyed airborne school. I just did. It was different than what I'd experienced at 7th ID. I still didn't really understood what it was to be a paratrooper, but I remember my first jump, I was left door number 2. And they had a little, it was me and this little girl from Hawaii. She was maybe 4'6", and we had to put parachutes on each other, but she was in the door position, each jump, and I was right behind her. So I was number 2 on all my jumps. But I remember jumping out, and I was just kind of looking around, and that was another thing too. That was my first time in Alabama. I was C-130. So I went out the door, and I just kept looking around, and then I hit the ground, and I remember standing up and looking at the plane kind of flying off, and I was like, "Man, I just jumped out of that thing. That's unreal." Because my first plane trip, was the basic training. I flew to basic, and I'd flown a couple times after that. But still, I hadn't flown on enough airplanes, probably more than a handful, 4 or 5 times. And now I'm jumping out of them. The night jump in jump school was probably the scariest for me, just because of all the horror stories. It was nighttime, combat equipment, 141, but the jump went off without a hitch. It was nothing to it. And off to the 82nd. So I re-enlisted. When I re-enlisted at 7th ID, I re-enlisted for airborne school en route to the 82nd. So life changed a lot for me there in a real short period of time because it's division. There's nothing like it.
That ORS cycle drives a lot of greatness, I think. Having to have your team and your equipment qualified, inspected, prepared, and ready to deploy, once, maybe twice a year, you had to go through that DRF1 cycle, and it was a tough thing. It was tough.
Mm-hmm. But it's like you said too, if you took it serious, it really told you whether you were ready or not. Are you ready? Okay. Which I kind of like. We had done a little bit of it at 7th ID. We did one full cycle before I, ended up coming to division, uh, because we didn't go into the cycle as our cohort unit was ETSing, and then we didn't go into the cycle as the new cohort unit was training up. So there was a long, almost a year period there where we didn't go into DRF at all. And we kind of did one right before I left. We were preparing for it. Um, and DRF there was strange because 7th ID, Fort Ord didn't have an airfield next to us. So we had to drive up to Travis Air Force Base, and we would leave our equipment up there as an artillery guy. So then we would come down and we would train with the infantry for about 2.5, 3 weeks. Whatever the infantry had as far as training schedule, that's what we did. So we
Oh,
did a
wow.
lot of road marching, a lot of land naving, a whole bunch of stuff like that that the infantry was doing because our equipment was up at Travis Air Force Base, sitting ready to go.
Were you good with your weapon? Were you a good shot?
Yeah, I always was. I was always a good shot. My dad was, he had taught me to shoot before I even went to basic. Um, but I will say this though, Drill Sergeant Contoy, so a little short drill sergeant, he was an ex-Marine, and I, I just he was very comfortable with weapons. He was very good at teaching weapons. I learned a lot from him. One day we were out there, and I forget, it was like it was one of those ranges where, they had the big old, you would shoot from different, you had already zeroed and all that stuff. Now you're shooting at these man targets, and they would go up and then they would come down and they would put the little discs on them and go back up and that type of thing. And he sat down next to me and he was like, okay, so breathe in and breathe. He gave me some instruction right there that I'll never forget. And I ended up actually, when I was at Fort Ord, it's one of the few pictures I got, because that's what I tell people nowadays too. Man, if I'd have some really cool pictures if we'd have had cell phones and whatnot back in the day. Yeah, I mean, because you just didn't take pictures back then. But I was shooting in the what they called the Commanding General's Cup at 7th ID, and they took a bunch of pictures of me out there. But I shot in those competitions a lot, um, representing my battalion out there. So that was pretty good. But yeah, I remember Contoys. I don't know. I think he probably thought I was a good shot and wanted to make me better. But yeah, I learned a lot from him about breathing, trigger pull, things like that, because he was like taking it to a whole different level than basic training at that point in time.
Do you remember somebody when you were a young NCO that you really looked up to, that you tried to model yourself after?
When you say young NCO, what rank you talking?
Whatever, you tell me.
When I first became I was a corporal for a while, okay, and then I became an E5, a sergeant E4, because back then a commander could promote you to sergeant. They called it acting jack. So you got paid as an E4 because you didn't make cutoff or whatever else, or you haven't been at the board, but we're going to work you as a sergeant. But when they first made me a corporal, I had a platoon sergeant. His name was Smoke Huddleston, and he was an old guy, a little overweight, couldn't run very well, that type of thing. But man, he was smart and he knew tactics like you would not believe. And we had a gunnery sergeant. So in a firing battery, you got two E7s. One is basically the platoon sergeant, they call him the Smoke. And then you got like an assistant platoon. So he's the junior E7. And we had this guy named Sergeant First Class Carter, was a Vietnam vet, first Cav. And I'll tell you what, man, if you looked at this guy, you probably gave him $1 because he looked like he was homeless half the time. And he used to tell stories about how he made E5 3 times. He'd been busted so many times in Vietnam for doing stuff. But I'll tell you what, man, when you got out in the field, he used to do manual gunnery with charts and darts and stuff. And I mean, this guy was just a brain like you wouldn't believe. And that was when it was those two that made me understand that you got to dig into these manuals. you got to dig into these. Back then we had those correspondence courses that they would send you to work. Yeah. And I would do like 10 of those things in a week. Um, you know, and I would constantly read 22-100, 22-101, 6-50 was the artillery manual. I was learning that stuff inside and out. And I learned real quick, you know, yeah, the muscle part you need and all that good stuff, but you still need to know what you're doing. And those two guys kind of set that foundation for that. They weren't they weren't by no means model NCOs. They were not somebody you would pick to represent your battalion in NCO or whatever. Okay, but they knew their stuff, and they knew their stuff too. But yeah, those two right there, I really looked up to a lot when I was E-485. Now, as I got up the ranks, Sergeant Major Costa and Sergeant Major England, those two boys right there. Those are some aces right there. And I knew I was lucky. I was very fortunate to have those two mentoring me, and pretty much my last 10 years in the Army. Those two guys right there were very influential. And Sergeant Major Thompson, who was my first sergeant when I got to 82nd, he was big time with me also, as far as the artillery part.
Tell me about your first team there in the 82nd, your first gun, tell me about that.
Okay, so, I just went through jump school. I'm coming from Legland, 5 jump cherry, but I'm an NCO. You go through repo. So my very first day in the 82nd is All-American Week. I walk into the oiler room with the Thursday prior. You come from repo, you go down there on Thursday, and these guys had just got out the field. I mean, they were literally cleaning weapons, turning stuff in, and they had just won the best dart battery, so the best firing battery in the division competition. They had just won it. And I'm standing there, and I'm brand new at a parade rest outside the first sergeant's office. And these guys are just, they're celebrating and they're happy, and I get it, and then, they called me in there, and they had a E5 section chief who was ETS and just getting out. So I was the second section, so I was going to take his section. So we went out to formation, and they gave them Friday off because they just got out of the field. And then Monday morning was division run at 5 o'clock or whatever it was. So the platoon sergeant, Smoke Green, comes up to me and he goes, "Hey, we're going to run." He goes, "Are you good at running?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine. You got no worries there." I was like, but I had no idea. I had never been in something like the division run. I mean, I didn't know what the hell was going on. I mean, it was crazy. But yeah, when I took over a section, it was decent. I had a couple of Spec 4s, older guys, and then I got a couple of privates in, and it turned into a really good section as it progressed along. But yeah, it was crazy that first week because I thought these guys were just like out of their minds, man. It was just, I know All-American Week was just, how it was, is half the unit was over here doing this, half the unit was over there. And then I went down to the push ball field and watched that go down. And I was like, man, I'm gonna have to take karate class or something to hang with these guys. It was culture shock for sure, man.
Looking back on push ball, right? That we like, I don't guess we invented the game, but that was the game. It was like,
Oh my
it's
God.
like, the more people you could drag off the field, the better. It was just weird.
Now I was standing there watching people just come out, and they were just bloody. I mean, they were just bloody. And they were like, we need 3 more out here. And I'm standing there, and I don't even have a Unit P t-shirt yet. So I'm like happy that I'm in a brown t-shirt, because I'm like, I do not want to go out there, man.
Oh, yeah.
I think the very next Monday, I actually had my cherry blast. I was, and this was back when you wore the big white thing over your helmet. It had a big cherry on the side of it, and and I had an Alice pack at that time, because I was an NCO, and our platoon sergeant was like, "Well, you're going to need to go to jumpmaster school. You need to get combat equipment jumps." So I didn't have a weapon, but I had my rucksack with me. So I was going to jump that. And then of course I got that big old white helmet, and I was on a 141 on Sicily at night. Um, and I was like, I don't know, right 47 or something. And there was some infantry guys on. It was just a hodgepodge of whatever. And the infantry, these, I'll never forget. It was three PFCs. One was sitting across from me, and one was either on side of me. And they were like, they called me Sergeant Cherry, is what they were doing. Sergeant Cherry, you better not freeze up in that door. We're gonna run you out the door. We're gonna run. You better not get scared up here. Are you scared right now, Sergeant Cherry? And I was just sitting there going, man, I want to punch these guys in the face. But we dumped that bird over Sicily like it was nothing, man. And I had the greatest jump. That I landed in a big pile of sand on Sicily Johnson. I was like, man, they got sand out here. Because Fryer was a little bit harder back then. That was before they plowed Fryer up. It was just, ground out there. So it kind of fascinated me. And I landed right next to the turning point. So I didn't have to find a turning point. So it went about as good as it could be, except for those PFCs from the infantry harassing me about
Sergeant Cherry.
Sergeant Cherry. They were trying to show me some respect, but at the same time disrespect me. You know what I mean?
That is classic. That's classic. Dan Bennett's first jump in division. He's wearing the cherry hat, and they're calling him Sergeant Cherry.
Yeah,
Dan Bennett, everybody. Oh my gosh. Oh, that's hilarious. Oh my gosh. So tell me about, those times. Remind me of the culture back then. What do you remember? Our culture was different. We hazed people, right? Cherry parties. What do you remember?
You know what? I remember one of the big things that I remember when I first got there, when we went out and shot for the first time as a unit. I was like, man, these NCOs are amazing. I mean, the level of competency that sergeants had, which just blew me away, because it was not like we all were not that good in the seventh ID. We just were not. And it might have just been we didn't train as much and that type of thing. But yeah, I just remember thinking to myself, man, I'm going to have to really step up here to hang with these guys, just to hang, because I was just wanting to hang with them. I wasn't trying to be, NCO of the quarter or anything else. I just want to hang with these guys. But that was something that one of the first things I remember about it. Another thing too, if it was an E7 or above, those guys had 15, 20 years in division. I mean, they had been in division forever. You didn't see a first sergeant who didn't have 10 years in the 82nd. Most of the platoon sergeants, I think every platoon sergeant I had, my first unit, our firing battery, the first sergeant and the fifth platoon, all those guys had been in division at least 15 years. So these guys not only were there doing it, they liked doing it. And, people were like, I used to tell later on in my career, I used to tell the younger soldiers, I was like, don't let the 82nd run you out of the Army. Okay. Go somewhere else, see what it's like. And then if you don't like the Army, then get out of the Army. But being in the 82nd is not in the Army. Okay. It's way different. I mean, division is division. I mean, that's just the way it is. But, if you don't like this, then go somewhere else and try something different. But don't give up on the Army right now just because you don't like the 82nd. But yeah, I remember that the competency that NCOs had, and officers too. I mean, we had some really great officers. I remember once when I PCS to Korea, I remember one of the commanders telling me, he's like, you know what, first Sergeant Bennett, you're going to be over there a couple of months and you're going to wish you had one of these airborne rangers from division to work with. Because yeah, it was the same thing. I mean, the commanders that we had were just unbelievable. And I think it's that airborne mentality because, we all shoot it up and we all exit the same way. We all hit the ground just as hard. There's nobody pulling rank on any special favors or anything or doing. You're not doing it any easier just because you're a major. It just ain't happening. But yeah, it was tough too. I just remember, running, every day it seemed like. I mean, running through Area J. It was shining boots. I mean, spit shine jungle boots were the way, what you had to wear every day. And you look good. I mean, why would you not want to do that? I mean, pressed BDUs with a beret and, spit shine jungle boots. You don't get any sharper than that nowadays.
Remember when we got up? Remember when we got upset when we had to walk the sawdust pit in our black boots there when we got in the new school? I brought in the little boot duster thing. Remember that? You dust your boots off.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a great place to be because you just worked with a lot of great people, man. And everybody had standards, and you had to meet that standard. If you didn't, you went back and worked harder, or they packed your bags and sent you down the road somewhere. I can remember guys leaving the units. We had this kid. I remember, I'll never forget this guy. He was like the distinguished honor graduate in basic training, but man, he didn't last 2 months in our unit, and they sent him down the street because he didn't want to jump anymore. But it was just tough. I mean, you had to either step your game up or wash out. It was difficult, but you can't compromise those standards if you're saying, if you got the division chain of command and all the way up to the Pentagon going, yeah, 82nd, 18 hours, they're wheels up, baby. I mean, that don't happen without a whole lot of butt kicking going on. Okay. The first time you do that, you realize, you got to move, and you got to move now. You got to move with a purpose. I loved it. I ate it up.
Tell me about being on 2-hour recall. You remember those days, signing in at the CQ desk, calling every minute if you went to the mall?
The best story I got about recall, because I think we were on DRF when Desert Storm happened. I think my unit was on DRF. I remember we got the call at like, I don't know, like 7:30 at night, I think, or something. And they were like, you guys, come on in. We're just coming in. And I called my then wife at work, and I said, hey, I just got called. I got to go in. I'll get back with you as soon as I can. Well, that was August. I didn't talk to her again, I think, till October. When do we go? We're in Desert.
You were that quick, huh?
Yeah, it was no briefing, no, things aren't like they are now. Now they prep you. You go through all this stuff prior to it. And that's why I tell people, I got a call at night. I went in, and the next time I talked to my wife at that time was 3 months later, and I was sitting in the desert. I mean, it was crazy.
It's hard to imagine a time without cell phones and text messages.
Yeah.
And no, I remember paying over $1 a minute to call from Korea home. Back in those days, and crazy money to communicate.
Yeah, having a pager was a big deal back then. You couldn't do anything with it. I mean, you still had to find a phone somewhere. But yeah, it was just a different time and a different army. I mean, and you know what? I feel bad for leaders today because, I mean, man, cell phones would drive me nuts. Social media, some private's wife get on there and just get to ripping the chain of command. Oh boy, I don't envy them one bit.
It's crazy times.
I can imagine how crazy that stuff would be.
Tell me about some leadership challenges.
Just adjusting to the 82nd when I first got there, that was tough. But once I got there and hit my pace, I was doing good. I was distinguished honor graduate from my BNOT class. I was always what we call the base piece, which is, the top gun in the battery. We won the dart the next year also, with me shooting base piece. I never had, you know what? I had a soldier one time that was always late to formation. And I was like, you know what? You're going to come in here with me. And I would come in with him. I was like, you're going to get here an hour before formation, and we're going to stand out here in this formation area. And I'm going to stand here with you. But until you can make it to work on time, we're going to come in an hour early and we're going to be here because you're embarrassing me when you come up. Reporting somebody out of ranks just because they're not there, they can't get to work on time. That used to drive me nuts. But, I lost a lot of sleep making sure that guy. And eventually he realized, okay, I'm not breaking this guy. So I need to just come to work on time so we both can get an extra hour of sleep. Okay. Because it didn't bother me, I'll come in. It didn't matter. Um, but I never had, I had a pretty good career as far as, um, I'll tell you this, a lot of people don't know this. I fought like crazy to not go to the advanced airborne school. I fought that assignment really hard. And basically what it came down to was Sergeant Major Costa, me sitting in his office and Costa telling me, Bennett, you're going and you better get a hat. Um, and that's how it went down. But when they were like, we need somebody to go down there and be an instructor, I fought it tooth and nail. I did not want to do it. I just wanted to be on the line doing my job, because that was the big thing back then. That's what they'd always tell you. Well, if you want to get promoted, you need to be in leadership positions. And I was coming close to probably moving up as a gunnery sergeant. I was getting to be one of the more senior E6s in the unit. So I was really looking forward to that. So when they were like, "Yeah, we want you to be this," I'm like, "No, I don't want to do that crap. I don't want anything to do with that place."
So were you fitting and wearing, or were you
No,
nomenclature?
I was AMO at first.
What?
Yeah, I
Oh,
went down.
wow.
My hat class was called the Aerial Delivery Components on
No way.
AMO.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what really worked for me big time was I was the last turd before we went to Desert Storm. So, they sent all the instructors back to their units when Desert Storm happened. Well, when we came back, they weren't running AMO courses or anything else. We were running basic airborne refresher, jumpmaster refresher. So everybody who had a hat had to pick up classes. So I picked up fitting and wearing. I picked up, a couple other classes that they taught down at Tower primarily. Um, but yeah, we were all jump master instructors at that point. There was no AMO committee, Tower committee, jump master committee. We were all jump master instructors at that point. And then about 2 or 3 months, I think, after we got back, then they got the jump master class going, and we kind of split off. Um, but I had done so much teaching with the jump master committee that they were young. And then when the jump master committee chief left, they came, the chief and the commander were like, "Hey, we want you to take the jump master committee." I'm like, "Okay, sure thing." But that's how I got to be jump master instructor. But really all my experience because for like 6 months we were teaching jump master refresher and airborne refresher to like everybody on the East Coast that needed to jump out of an airplane. I mean, we had everybody, National Guard units from Atlanta and all kinds of stuff coming there. I mean, it was ridiculous. We would teach probably 400 or 500 basic airborne refresher students a day. I mean, it was crazy how
Wow.
much we were instructing at that time.
Tell me about turd training. What does that mean? Where does that come from? If somebody is not familiar with that term,
You know what?
tell me about it.
I am a proud of being a turd. Okay, a trainee undergoing rigorous development. Okay, and the first time, Rick Gayton is a good friend of mine on Facebook. He was my trainer, and boy, he just lit into me. And here's another thing too. I was the last turd to train in the trailer. So at the Jumpmaster School, they had where the Dirty Herc was when you were there. There was I mean, this trailer was probably the nastiest thing. It looked like something that somebody had bought for $10 off the Merc and drug in there. It had no air, it had nothing in it, and you trained in there. Like it had a mock slant table in it, and we would sit in there, and that was where we trained out of. And I was the last one to train in it, and it was just nasty. I mean, showing up every day and living in that thing, trying to study all those manuals. I was thinking about that the other day too, man. It must be so easy for turds right now with Google, because I mean, I think I had a library card for every library within a 50-mile radius of Fort Bragg, because I was doing so much research and stuff now. But you know what? Well, that's exactly what I do now. As a professor, that's all I do. I teach and I research, and I learned how to do it at the Advanced Airborne School through turd training. Um, I approach it just like I did as a turd. I mean, it's the same thing.
So Sergeant Major Acosta told you better get your hat. So tell me about your committee class and your hat class. Did they do it the same way back then?
There was probably a lot more harassment back then. So I had a decent committee. There was one guy on there, Clint Hall. He used to ask me a lot of stupid questions. He used to make me mad, and I'd end up researching something that didn't make any, didn't mean anything to what I was researching or whatever. Um, but my hat class, there was a guy, the tower committee chief at that time was a guy named Bruno Casala, and he was from Jersey, and he missed his calling in life because he should have been a comedian. He was funny as all get out, but he was also harassing at the same time. So I mean, he would be harassing you but making everybody else laugh. Okay. And then you're trying not to laugh because you're trying to keep your composure. So my hat class went I didn't think it went smooth, but it did. I mean, looking back on it now, knowing what I know now. But he was just ripping me, man. I was up there laughing and losing my composure, forgetting things. I mean, he just had me flustered to the point to where when I walked out of the building, I was like, man, I'm done. I'm toast. And I got to go back and face Acosta. I'm like, there's no way, man. And then they came out, and the chief, they didn't call him a first sergeant at that point. He was called the chief instructor. So everybody referred to him as chief. It was Master Sergeant Finaccio, who used to run PT and smoking a cigarette at the same time. he would run around the flight line. The first time I ran with him, we were running around the flight line. We got about 2 miles in, and this guy reaches into his PT shorts, pulls out a pack of cigarettes and a lighter, and he lights a cigarette. Now, we ain't broke stride. I mean, we have not broke stride. We are on about maybe a 7.5, 8 minute pace. He's got these big old hairy forearms, and he's just a puffing away, man. And I'm just back there gasping for air. I kind of moved to the left away from him because I was kind of behind him a little bit, because he's blowing smoke in my face and I can't breathe, and because he's smoking a cigarette, running a 5-mile run around the daggone flight line at Pope.
See, that's some of the stuff in the times that I'm serious, really.
Yeah,
it was crazy.
People don't get that the guys like that existed, man. And I mean, I never seen him run PT, but when he got in a mood to run, man, he would kill you. I mean, he would just kill you. Rob Maggott, I've seen you talk to him a while back. That dude was a beast, man. I could never outrun him. I mean, he was unreal back in the day. But yeah, I mean, Finaccio would just drive me crazy. So he'd come out there and he messed with me a little bit, and then they were like, well, you passed. We're going to make you a hat. And then it was funny too, because this was something else, back then. So now I'm the rookie. Okay. So I'm making coffee every morning. I'm the only rookie. I'm making coffee every morning. I'm scrubbing the wings. I'm scrubbing the cup of knowledge. But we also had back then black hat dues. So we had this really old leather briefcase. I mean, it looked like something from the 1920s. And it had a green book in there from supply. And you had to go around every month and collect $2 from all the hats. And I'm telling you what, man, those guys would just harass you for like 10 minutes. I'm like, dude, just give me your $2. I got stuff to do, man. And once you got it all done for the month, you had to report back to the master sergeant, hey, I got all the dues. And if somebody didn't pay, you had to tell him who didn't pay so he could go shake them down and get that $2. And we used that money, for like going away presents and things like that, cup and flower fund, stuff like that. But yeah, that used to be a rookie duty. You used to have to do that. And man, it was just, them guys would give you so much crap. It was just unreal. It was worse. It's like having a hat party every month, man. It's just,
oh my gosh, I'm laughing so hard.
They would harass you to the point to where you were just like, dude, save it for the hat party, okay?
So tell me about a hat party real quick, if you don't mind. Just explain.
That's something nowadays they would court-martial the entire division chain of command if they ever found out. I'm sure prop blasts were more back then than what they are now too, though. But yeah, once you got your hat, and we would back when I got mine, we would wait till a couple people got their hat, and then we would actually have one. And then, you had to pretty much feed everybody, plan the entertainment, and, just overall just debauchery is the best way to explain it. And, of course, back then we had a lot of alcohol too. Like I said, nowadays they would court-martial the entire division chain of command if they found out about the things that went on at a hat party. I mean, it was just unreal.
Did you read the story I wrote about me and you at Rick's?
Yeah, I read that.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remembered it once I read it. I mean, I didn't remember it enough to probably retell the story before I read your story. But as I was reading the story, I was like, yeah, I remember that now. I remember exactly how that went down.
Remember the office and everything?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember the office part more so than I did Rick's part, because I think I had more alcohol in me at Rick's than I did at the office. But I remember that night. Didn't we start off at McMurtry's house?
I lost your voice. I lost your voice.
You good? You good?
Oh no, I'm losing you. All right, I got you back. You
got me back?
Yeah, it's showing your connection is unstable. Okay. But all right, keep going.
Tried to move my computer a little bit there.
All right, I'm sorry, I missed the whole key of your story. I missed it.
I was saying, didn't we start off at McMurtry's house that night? I think was that the night we went to McMurtry's house? Maybe not.
I think that was another night.
Okay.
I think that was another night. I definitely remember the McMurtry night.
Okay.
I remember that.
I didn't know if the two were connected or not.
Do you remember going to Pittock's house at the horse farm one time and playing a poker game?
Yeah.
I never forget you pulling that little pistol out of your pocket, putting it up on the table. I was like, I stood up a little straighter.
Hey man, it's Fayetteville. You gotta make sure.
So tell me.
Plus, I didn't know where I was going.
Tell me about the cast of characters we had around us did you start rookie numbers?
You know what? That started actually right after Desert Storm. So I didn't start it, to answer your question. What happened was when the whole Fort Bragg came back from Desert Storm, well, of course, a lot of instructors rotated out. So we were short like 6 instructors. So they had so many of them training at one time. And the guy who probably should get credit for rookie numbers is a guy named Gerard. I don't remember his first name. He got out. You remember Gerard? He got out and it was like an ambulance guy or something. I don't know. Did EMT, he was a medic or something. But he didn't learn anybody's name. He just numbered him. He's like, give me the first rookie in here. Give me number 2, number 3. So that's how rookie numbers started. It was because they had so many turds at the time, they couldn't keep track of them. So they just numbered them. They didn't learn anybody's name. Well, because here's the thing. A lot of people don't realize this too about turd training. You lose a lot more than you keep. There's a whole lot more people that drop out of turd training that never become black hats. So that was the reason why. I mean, they were starting to number them. So then once they got their hat, they just kept their numbers. And then it started after the hat thing, we started numbering them out that way, which I thought was a pretty cool thing at the time. But yeah, that's why I don't have a rookie number, because it started after I was there. But
I was always proud to be rookie number 13. You know, I thought that was cool.
yeah,
I thought that was cool to have a
but I
rookie.
was the last rookie to train without getting a number.
Oh wow, that's cool.
But that's how it all started. Yeah, you know what? One of the things that I really benefited from in my career that I know a lot of people don't experience this is when you're working at a place like the Advanced Airborne School, that's one of the few places as a career NCO where you're going to work so closely with guys from different MOSs. I mean, I like to hear about things from the infantry, the ADA, the engineers. You're not ever going to work or with those guys that kind of close. I mean, I learned so much from those guys as far as, this is how we do it down in the O4. You know what I mean? Because everybody, talks that way. Um, so having the ability to, work in that kind of environment with different people from different backgrounds really, really makes you appreciate all the things that you've learned and, all the things you pick up on and that type of thing.
Tell me about the people that you remember back in those days. You know, we had Hines, Papillo, Johnson.
Man, we had some studs,
P-Shock.
We had some studs back then. I'll tell you one that you probably don't know about. Dave Bailey. Did you know him?
I know the name.
He was a jumpmaster instructor. Yeah, man. I'll tell you what, that guy could teach. I mean, when you used to when he would give a talk through, we would all stand out there and listen to him. Because I mean, he was as we used to. They had a saying, he was as smooth as peach drippings. I mean, he was unreal. And that's what I used to tell instructors too. I was like, when you got other instructors talking about how good of an instructor you are, you're good. But man, I can remember standing there, listening to Dave Bailey give a talk through. I was like, man, I wish I could sound like that, because he was just as smooth, word by word, not a deviation from the ASOP one bit, man. It was like he was reading that stuff with a microphone in his hand. I mean, he was unbelievable. And I used to try to emulate him a lot. He was just a very professional individual as far as being a hat. And I was a younger hat when he was there, but yeah, he was just unreal. I had a lot when I was Jump Master Committee Chief. I mean, I just had a lot of good instructors. You guys were just unbelievable, man. And then moving from Green Ramp on to down next to Division, that I remember that was probably about as hard as I worked in the Army. That transition period, remember?
I remember.
Yeah, I mean, that was unreal, because I think you and I were putting in about 16-hour days back then.
Oh yeah.
And then we were flying evaluations too. I mean, it was many nights I just wrapped up in a parachute on the platform and went to sleep.
So tell me a little bit about, if you don't mind. I hate to really bring it up, but we were at a crash scene together. It was what I consider to be one of the worst days of my life.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. It was worse than combat. It was, that experience right there, and then you throw in Haiti. Those two things right there probably would make most people's careers, but I mean, they were just things that we went through. I remember we had just went on a 20-minute break, and I was standing outside Chief's office, and I walked in, and it just went black. I mean, everything it was black and it was dark. And then I ran outside, and man, there was a kid coming around a Connex, and he was just on fire. And I jumped on top of him. And then I remember at one point looking over back at the schoolhouse, and you had a box of first aid stuff, and you were coming out of the jump master classroom, I think, with it or whatever. And it was just chaos, man. I mean, it was unbelievable at the moment. And I was helping a guy work on somebody, and Yeah, it was unreal. That was one of the that was probably, without a doubt, probably the worst day of my military career. Because I mean, there was, when I came around the corner and you just seen bodies laying everywhere, and people were trying to help people, and I was like, I remember yelling at JJ. I was like, get in that truck. We're gonna load as many people as we can on this 5 ton and get them to Womack as fast as you can. And I remember we just stacked bodies in the back of that thing, man. I mean, we just threw all kinds of people back there. And well, hell, I didn't even know if they were alive or not. We just jammed at as many people. And then I remember somebody getting in front of the truck trying to move the rucksacks. And I was like, get out of the way.
That
I was
was
like,
me.
JJ, go. Yeah, I was like, JJ, go. Just run and go. um, and you know, it was funny because they landed a medevac bird, but I think by the time they landed the medevac bird, we had threw enough guys on vehicles and got people out of there. There was nobody left. Um, but yeah, that was one horrific day. Something I try to forget. I don't think I'm ever going to forget. Um, but it was crazy. That was. I'm glad. I hope nothing like that ever happens again. Ever. I mean, I just. And we
You
didn't
know
we
what?
didn't lose any students either. I mean, that was the big thing too. I mean, after all that was over with, we were like, wow, did we lose a student? I mean, you know, because the gut. I mean, it took out the gut truck. Hell, half the class would have been at the gut truck at that time. Luckily, we had just taken the break, so they didn't have time to kind of move over there. So
Tell me about Haiti.
yeah, Haiti was the biggest thing that didn't happen, man. A lot of people don't really, you know, and I you know, I listen when I read a blog or something now about young kids, you know, like, you know, they don't understand that the training, you know, you're not going to prepare for every scenario. So the more training you get, the better off you're going to be as a soldier. Um, I remember Haiti going down, and I'll tell you the big thing I remember about Haiti. We were in the air. I was the first aircraft I was safety in. I wasn't going to jump into Haiti. I was safety on General Steele's door, and Larry Bishop was his RTO, who was an ex-hat. He had actually left the jumpmaster school to go be the division commander's RTO. Just a stud, man, just one heck of a stud NCO. But I remember the loadmaster tapping me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, there's a storm and we can't fly around it. We're going to fly through it." And man, it reminded me of when I was a kid watching the Wizard of Oz, and the tornado was twisted and the Wicked Witch of the West was on her broom. That was probably the most afraid I've ever been on an aircraft in my life, going through that storm, because there was lightning cracking around us like crazy. We were bobbling and wobbling and everything else. And, you know, I really thought it was going to happen, but you know, it was, you know, we were, you know, they were trying to cut a deal with the president at that time to, you know, I think it was Senator Nunn, and you know, ex-President Carter would, you know, told him they hate 80 seconds in the air, and then they turned us around. But that was probably the biggest combat jump that didn't happen. But I mean, we went through everything to make it happen except jump. Um, that was a difficult mission. That was a long time coming too, boy. Because I think we were supposed to go one night, and then we sat for another, yeah, 2 nights or something, and then it happened, and we loaded up, and it was raining that night too. It was cold. Oh my God, we were under the wing of the aircraft trying to JMPI guys, and I know the ASOP says 64 jumpers, but I think I had about 73 guys on that airplane that night. They were jammed up in there. We we had everything, and the Air Force had, you know, all this stuff loaded up in there for their contingency plans too. I I had never seen a C-130 so packed in my life. But yeah, that was, division was ready to go. We were ready to go on that one, boy. There would have been some Haitians that wish they had never messed with us if we actually jumped on that jump. It was a lot of planning went into that too. I think they still have the jumpmaster planning packets that we created down there. There's a copy of them hanging on the school down there. I haven't been to the school in several years, so I don't know. But uh, but yeah, that took a lot of work. That was a lot of work. Yeah.
Do you remember, I think it was Colonel Abizade who threatened any safeties that he found on the ground?
Yeah, yeah. General Steele said that too. He's like, make sure people know that they better not jump. They better. And I'm like, I don't, I trust the B-18, but I don't trust it that much. I'm not going into combat with it.
I'll take my chances on the way out. Thank you. I was amazed at how many people, when we turned around, you had 50% were over the board ecstatic that we were going home. And then 50% that were so mad that they were not going to get a combat jump, that they were just furious. Did you notice that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, you know, and I guess the whole division's always been that way. I mean, you know, if you talk to World War II guys, they're the same way. They talk about the same thing, you know, guys that just wanted to do it. They just wanted to. And you know what, probably, you know, I was safety in at that time because I had just had a knee operation. So probably if I didn't have that knee operation, I'd been one of those guys that, no, I want to go. I'd found a way to finagle a parachute somehow.
So I remember when you blew your knee out, I was guarding you as you were coming down the basketball court. You know, I was right in front of you, kind of trying to stop you at half court or whatever, and you crossed over, and then all of a sudden you just crumpled on the floor, and I'm just like, oh no.
Yeah, yeah. I just planted and it just blew. I mean, one of those. It was just a freak accident. Even my orthopedic surgeons was like, you know, this is just a freak accident right here that you just tore this much stuff up.
Wow.
Doing it because you got 4 main ligaments in your leg or your knee, and I tore 3 of them, 3 out of the 4, and nobody touched me. I mean, nobody. I mean, I just stopped and boom, went. You know. So.
Oh well. Oh, so when it's time to go, it's time to go. So tell me about, you know, tell me about becoming a senior NCO and your jobs and things, and you know, you spent a lot of time at the school, but you spent other time, you know, places elsewhere. Tell me more about that.
Really, the only right after so I was at the school as jumpmaster committee chief, and I came down on orders for Wisconsin, Fort McCoy, Wisconsin. So I was going to be a range NCO at Fort McCoy, Wisconsin.
That's what your branch decided they wanted to send you to do.
That's what Branch was wanting me to do. And I was like, okay, because I had been at Bragg at this point probably 8 years, 9 years, and hadn't went anywhere. Um, so I got Chief of Staff Colonel Jay Hood involved, and he was an ex-artillery guy, but he was also the division's Chief of Staff at that time. He went from Davarti Command up to the Chief of Staff, and I called him and I was like, hey, you know, I don't mind leaving if I got to leave, okay, but let me go to a combat line unit, okay. I don't want to go up in Fort McCoy and pass out keys for 3 years or whatever. So I was like, I'll go to Korea, go to 2ID, and that's fine, and that was fully what I was expecting to happen. So Branch changed my assignment, and I went up to Korea. But I didn't go to 2ID. I got orders to go to Yongin, Korea, at Third Rock Army headquarters. So Korean Army split into 3 pieces: First Rock Army, Second Rock Army, Third Rock Army. So the Third Rock Army is the main effort there on kind of the eastern side. It has Seoul and all that other stuff. Okay. Well, each one of those Army headquarters has what is called a combat support coordination team, and it's really rank heavy. We had a full bird colonel, we had a bunch of lieutenant colonels, a lot of senior NCOs, very few enlisted soldiers, E1 through E4s. We had some drivers and some intel kids and some stuff like that, but it was only about 50 people in the unit. And I was the fire support NCO for the fire support branch. So I spent the year doing a lot of targeting, a lot of training their National Guard guys. And then what was really cool was when they found out I had spent so much time in division, their SF guys really pulled me in for like airborne operations and things like that. So I worked a lot with their SF, but I was on third or yeah, third, was it first or third? First, I want to say it was first Rock Army headquarters in Yongin. It's about halfway between Seoul and Osan. So it was right there. And it was a really good assignment because, man, I learned so much. We would work, battle plans with the JSA and things like that. I mean, it was just some really cool stuff, and it had this new targeting software that I learned, to do op plans and look at targets over the North Korean side and things like that. It was a really, really good assignment. So I learned a lot, met a lot of good people there too. Like I said, it was really rank heavy, so it was mainly officers and senior NCOs. I would spend a lot of times and it was funny because General Luck was a commander at that time too. He was he was the Korea commander for the peninsula or whatever. So I'd run into him every once in a while. Hey, come here, Airborne, that's a stud right there, boy. When you talk about somebody that was a great guy. But yeah, it was a great assignment. And then I came back to and what was good was personally, I was able to get my knee back into shape to where I could run and be a soldier again. I did a lot of ruck marching on my own while I was over there. Ran a lot of extra miles just to get my knee back into shape. So it was good personally in that sense too, because it gave me time to get back into division shape and then come back to division. So when I came back to Bragg, and this was like 95, 96, I think, somewhere along in 96, I think it was, I had a P2 profile for jumping. So I had to get Colonel Warren, my surgeon. I don't know where he was. He was supposed to come back. He was like in Bosnia or some mess or something. But they were like, well, we could set up a board, a review board. Blah, blah, blah. But really what I needed was to, get that P2 lifted so I could jump and go back to division. Well, they wouldn't let me do it. So I went down to 18th Airborne Corps and Bravo 1st and 377, I think it was. And I was a gunnery sergeant down there for a while. And then I became a platoon sergeant. And I'd only been there about 6 months and the E8 list came out and I was on it in the secondary zone. I wasn't expecting to make it that quick. But as soon as, and it just worked out that the first sergeant at the Advanced Airborne School was leaving at that time. And they were like, hey, we need to find a first sergeant. And I heard about it. It was actually Joe Hafner who called me and said, hey, First Sergeant Morning's getting ready to leave. We need a first sergeant. Why don't you come down here? So I threw my name in the hat and I interviewed with England at that time. And I had known England a little bit before, but that was the first time we kind of like were sitting down face to face, mentoring process, that type of thing. And he picked me to be the first sergeant down there. And then when he left division, he told me, I need you to come down here. And, he's, well, first of all, he goes, look, I don't care who writes your NCOER, you work for me, and I was like, oh, okay. So, but, I had a mentoring from him that most NCOs never get to experience, because anytime he had something going on, so, I mean, he would have a brigade sergeant majors meeting, all the brigade command sergeant majors, him, the HHC first sergeant, and then my dumb behind, sitting there. And I would just soak in this stuff up, man. I would just listen to these guys and, and talk about things that had to be done and things that were going on and how they were going to execute things. And I mean, he just liked me. And of course, I loved him because he was, I mean, you don't get a better NCO than Steve England. I mean, you just don't. He was a stud, man. And he would come down there to school, come in my office, grab a piece of candy off my desk, sit down and talk for 35, 40 minutes, about things that were going on, what I needed to do, what I needed to focus on. And, do you need anything? That type of thing. I mean, he was just amazing. And then he left and went to Corps. And then, like a couple of days he was up there at court, and then Sergeant Major Charlie Thorpe took over as the division sergeant major. So I get a call from Sergeant Major England's office, and they were like, "Hey, Sergeant Major wants to meet with you," and da da da. So it was like a Friday afternoon late or something, and I go up there, and he goes, "I just want to take care of you. Where do you want to go? What do you want to do?" And I said, "Sergeant Major, I'll go anywhere you need me to go, and I'll do anything you need me to do." And he goes, "Well, I just want to make sure that you didn't have your own plans." He said, "But this is what I need you to do. I need you to stay there to school and take care of Sergeant Major Thorpe for a year. And then once you're ready to leave, you come tell me where you want to go and I'll make it happen." So, I mean, a lot of people think I was just kind of homesteading at division or at the Advanced Airborne School. But really, when you got the division sergeant major saying, "Hey, I need you here," what are you going to say? Nah, I'm going to go down here and do something else. No, you do what the division sergeant major wants you to do. So I stayed there my last 2 years with Thorpe, and he was a heck of an NCO too. He was different. He's different than England, but him and I got along really good too, and I learned a lot from him as well. So yeah, it was. I knew that I was very fortunate in the mentoring that I was getting, because not everybody gets Steve England telling them what you should do on a daily basis. So there's no way you can screw that up.
I hear you. I hear you. So tell me about, some of the things that you went through there as a first sergeant of the Advanced Airborne School. You saw a lot of different things. At one point you had the sports parachute club or the demonstration team. I mean, lots of different things were changing. Tell me about all that.
I probably, as the first sergeant of that school, you probably have more visibility on Fort Bragg than probably anybody around. You got to be able to handle that too. I remember anytime the Fayetteville Observer had some story, they were down there with a reporter and they wanted to talk to somebody. And a lot of times it was me. The division sergeant major would bring sergeant major of the Army down there. If there was some foreign dignitary on Fort Bragg, they came by there. You know what? I'll share this though. I'll tell you what, this was probably the most impactful individual that ever came through the Advanced Airborne School. So, and Gerald Shelton, I think, was the Corps commander at this time. I don't remember who the division commander was, but we were down at the new school. You might have been there at that time. I don't remember. But I remember I had Bates take care of this kid. So we had a VIP, was what the thing that was going, they do a demo for him and all this other stuff. And, but it was a little 9-year-old boy that was dying of cancer, and his cousin was in the 82nd. And his dream before he died, his Make-A-Wish through the Make-A-Wish Foundation, was to be a paratrooper. So he came down to Advanced Airborne School. He started his day at the Advanced Airborne School. So they were going to take him out and he was going to shoot guns and do all this other stuff. But he started his day at the Advanced Airborne School to train to be a paratrooper. So we, he was out there, and, he was already, didn't have any hair from chemo, and he was kind of weak. But we put him through some PLFs, and, we drug him in the parachute, and he was too weak to ascend out of the tower. And then we had a little ceremony for him, and, put his beret on him and gave him a diploma, and, pinned his wings on him and all of that stuff. And, his parents and his family stand off the side and they're just crying. And, Bates is crying, and, and he, the thing is, here's a 9-year-old kid. He can have any wish in the world, and he wants to do what we got paid to do every day. I mean, how do you not come to work and appreciate what you can do physically and what you're able to do when you got this little boy that could have went to Disneyland or Disney World or, the Bahamas or wherever he wanted to go, and he wanted to come to Fort Bragg and be a paratrooper like his cousin. I mean, after that, everybody else that come down there, movie stars or, people like that. Yeah, let me tell you about this little boy dying of cancer. But, you got so much visibility as the first sergeant down there. Not just the airborne stuff, but, I was constantly going back and forth to Fort Benning, working with the infantry school to make sure things and tactics and procedures and things like that was stayed straight. And, it was a heck of a run, man. That was just an amazing job. I had some studs working for me, Hines and Hafner and, Ware and Marshall and Bates and Roberts and, man, some good dudes, man. They made, yeah, and the commanders too. I mean, we had some really good commanders come through that school. I mean, I used to tell Captain Schweitzer all the time, well, General Schweitzer now, I used to tell him all the time, he was the creme de la creme. I mean, and I told him, I think I said this in my retirement speech. He was the commander that I always compared to other commanders to. Um, but Captain Bowden, when I left, he was just an awesome guy. I mean, I had so many commanders down there that we were. Steve Baker, oh my God, that guy was just amazingly fabulous. But yeah, we had a lot of good commanders come through there when we were down there too. How can you screw that up? You got these hand-picked officers that are in charge of you, and here's the thing too. I always thought it was very difficult to be the commander of the Advanced Airborne School, because really you can't do nothing but screw it up. And you guys just come down there and kind of go with the flow and do blend in, and there isn't a whole lot for you to do because the NCOs are going to do the job and they're going to get things done. Um, but yeah, I mean, they were still great commanders, though. They were just good people, is what the deal was.
I tell everybody that you're responsible for my name change.
For your name change.
Mm-hmm. So when I was a kid, my name is Andrew William Marshall Jr., and my mom called me William. Well, I joined the Army, and Private Andrew Marshall, private whatever. I got to the Advanced Airborne School, and I'm putting my hat on, and you're like, "What's your name?" I'm like, "Well, what do you mean, what's my name?" You're like, "What's your first name?" And I'm like, "Arr." And so that's where I changed my name to Will.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell me about your name policy. Tell me about that. Help me understand why you thought it was okay that we could call each other by our first names.
And you know what? And I know people that drove people nuts. I mean, some people I didn't, because they said, I want to be addressed as Sergeant such and such. But when you work that close together with one another, and you're that, I just always, my name is Dan. If you want to call me Dan, call me Dan. I don't care. I mean, it didn't bother me. And it was always kind of down more than up. But I just always saw you guys more as people than I did, NCOs. Um, and I wanted to make sure that everybody kind of understood that I see you as a person first, not so much as a sergeant or even a soldier. I mean, not that that's not important, but the first thing I see is an individual. Everybody's got problems. Everybody's got things to deal with. Everybody's got a family. And it's easier to talk to Will when he's having problems with his family than sometimes it is to talk to Sergeant Marshall. Because when you're standing there going, well, Sergeant Marshall, tell me what your problem is, well, that doesn't come across as nice as if I say, hey, Will, what do you got going on, man? You know what I mean? It drops people's defenses, and it, helps you trust them a little bit more. And, it worked for us. I don't know if it would work for anybody else, or I don't know how they do things down there now, but it worked for us. And it wasn't something I did when I was down in my units. I mean, maybe across NCOs, other section sergeants. But even then, we referred to each other by their last names. We would just call them, Bourne or Travai or something like that. We didn't call them, unless we were off base or something like that. But it kind of, we spent a lot of time. Instructors, we would get there at 5:30, 5 o'clock, go home at 6:30. I mean, eat together, sleep together. If we were doing evaluations at night, you might be there you might have got there at 5 o'clock and get back at 2 a.m. the next morning. I mean, it was just the way, I like things to go. And, I think a lot of people appreciated that it seemed a little personal sometimes.
So walking around the division area with your black hat on, you're like royalty, right? You're like royalty among paratroopers with that black hat on.
For the most part. Now, every once in a while, I remember one time we were at Manifest Call, we were checking Alice packs down there, and this master sergeant boy, he lit into us. You nitpicky pissants, you guys, and all the, he's just ripping into the black hats. You guys think you're the shit, down there hiding from the line, and all the privates around this guy is just get him, get him, get him top, get him top. He was a master sergeant, so I'm assuming he was working in S3 or something. But yeah, he did not like the idea that we were going to evaluate them that night. And he wasn't even on the jumpmaster team or nothing. He was just a jumper. But somewhere along the line, some black hat had pissed him off, and boy, he was extracting some revenge on me. So, but you're right. For the most part, you've always got a seat at the big kids table, and people know who you are, and people recognize you, and you get treated pretty good. I remember, and I actually wrote an email one time, and General McChrystal emailed me back, and he was up at Corps at that time. I don't remember what it was, but we were getting close to the end of September. We were getting ready to buy some furniture for the jumpmaster classroom, and I had let the supply sergeant go on leave, and he was on leave the last week of December. And division comes down and says, "Hey, first sergeant, we found some money. Here's your 10 grand to go buy chairs." And I was like, "Oh man!" So I had to go buy the chair. So I went over to Corps and went into some building or something over there, and I had my black hat on, and I run into this lady, and I'm like, "Hey, I know I know this ain't your job. I need some help. This is what I got to do. I'm First Sergeant Bennett from Advanced Airborne School." So she calls me in. And well, first of all, she's standing there, and she's another lady walks up as I'm explaining this, and I get done, and I just look at them, and they look at me, and I'm sitting here, and I go, "They're getting ready to throw me out of this building," because they could have. Honestly, they could have. But they called me back there. She gets on her computer and she starts doing this, and I call division, and I get the requisition order, and I get the money order and all that good stuff. But basically they made it happen. So I go back to my office, and first of all, I walk out of their office and I go around, and there's like a little marquee right there with the chain of command on it. And there's some full bird colonel that's in charge of this purchasing division or whatever it was. So I sent him an email, and I courtesy copied the comptroller over the division. And I was like, "This is what happened today. I know these two ladies did not have to help me, but they did. And, I got this accomplished, and, it was, a screw up on my part, and they really helped me out, and da da da." That email circled all around Corps. I had so many people telling me, Corps headquarters, well, because a lot of times the civilians on post that work in those offices tucked way back under whatever, all they ever get is complaints. And I was like, you know what? These guys did not have to help me. And I'm sure whatever they did to help me was above and beyond their job. So then McChrystal emails me by the end of the day, and he's just like, "First Sergeant, you did such a great thing here," and basically thanked me for thanking them for doing something for me. But a lot of people don't receive that kind of recognition just doing your everyday job, even helping somebody out in that situation. And they just, it was just something that I was glad. I wasn't trying to, I was just really trying to thank somebody. I was letting the commander know, "Hey, these two did a great job today helping me out." But because it was the first sergeant of the Advanced Airborne School, it blew up and made a big deal. And it got around to a lot of people in Corps.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
But I mean, I just appreciated them helping me, because I didn't know what to do. I mean, I was really screwed, is what I was.
Tell me about accident investigations or death or problems that you were a part of. I know you were a part of a lot of them around there, and we had a lot of different procedures change while you were a jumpmaster instructor and a first sergeant.
The biggest ones that stick out in my mind is like a couple of times we lost a student. I'll never forget the student that died on Luzon drop zone. He went out to clear the rear, came back in, caught his ripcord grip, and um, things like that. It reminds you how dangerous it is of what we did and what we do. You know, occasionally now I'll catch, a story, I guess we've went a couple years here, but I think last year they had a fatality, a fatality. A young lady, I think, died jumping out of a helicopter. A lot of people don't, I mean, you don't, when you're that close to it, it's a constant reminder of how dangerous this is that we do. And, the people, you jump all the time, and we did it so much at the school. That was another thing too. I mean, people ask me how many jumps I got. Man, I stopped counting a long time ago. I mean, they were back in the day when I was on the AMO committee. Like every time the jumpmaster committee didn't need their weather aircraft, we would strap hang it out. And I mean, I would jump master at least 2 or 3 times a month along with jumping. Um, as well as, when we worked with the test board. I do remember the only time I ever got hurt on a jump, and I've hit some stuff. I've hit Humvees. I hit the bleachers at Sicily once. Yeah, or peel left right off like the second or third row down, hit right there. Boy, it was sweet. I actually wasn't a bad landing. Um, but the only time I ever got hurt, we were jumping. I was working with the test board, and we were jumping it was some sort of lowering line for the AT4 jump pack. It was a different one than the one we were using. And we had done like 5 or 6, we called them elevator drills, right? Going up and down with helicopters or C1. No, this was a C-130 is what it was. We had done the elevator drills before. So we were doing a C-130X is what it was. So, I get about 200 feet and I go to lower this thing, and it drops and it stops right below my feet. And I rolled my ankle really bad on that thing. I really thought I broke it, but the doctor was like, no, it's just a really bad sprain. But that was the only time I've ever gotten hurt on a jump. That was it. Yeah, I hit the DZSO vehicle once, and then I hit a platform up in Wisconsin one time too, but I never got hurt. So, but but yeah, I mean, when you walk around with that black hat on, it don't matter what your rank is. Just the fact that they see that hat, they know, it's and, and I hope a lot of people always thought of me a lot more than what that master sergeant was at that jump that time, because I'll never forget that guy, because it happened early on when I first became a black hat, because you see him and you're just like, wow, those are the airborne guys, and I just never got criticized. And then he had a cheering section going on with the privates. It humbled you real quick, you know what I mean?
It was Sergeant Cherry all over again.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh my gosh. So talk to me about the pressure of a young captain going to jumpmaster school and failing. Right.
A captain. I remember a general. I remember the COSCOM commander failing. Were you there when that happened? Yeah. Commanders having to be jump masters. I agree with it, and it should always happen. You have to. The ones I always felt really bad for were the ones in command already, and then the pressure is on them to pass this class. I don't know what their graduation rate is now. I would say during our heyday, it was at best 50, 60%. But I mean, you would have those classes where we would only get 30 or 40% through. So you're talking 80 students and we graduate 30. I mean, that wasn't unusual. Yeah, we always, as a stick leader, we always tried to make sure those guys that, we always gave them an eye, always gave them an extra look in the circle. If they needed anything or something like that. I remember the same thing, sergeant majors. I remember when I went to the Audie Murphy board, two of the command sergeant majors that were on the Audie Murphy board, I had put through jumpmaster school, and one of them I graded on JMPI the last day. Um, so it was funny that, now the tables had turned and they were grilling me about the Audie Murphy board, and I was like, man, I remember when you were shaking in your boots trying to pass JMPI. Don't give me any of this mess.
The JMPI exam was a great equalizer, wasn't it?
Oh yeah.
Like everybody that's wearing a senior or master parachutist wings, you just know that you have a common bond. That 5 minutes and 3 jumpers is
Mhm.
crazy fast.
And that was when I first took over as the first sergeant. That I don't know what the deal was. It was some big push. Why 5 minutes? I actually wrote an article about that for the jumpmaster, master jumpmaster thing or whatever we had. But there was a big push to maybe increase the time on that test. I was like, we don't need that. What we need is to just train harder and train better to where we can get more guys. But you can't stop a guy from panicking. I mean, you just can't. You can't stop them from freaking out. I'm sure you remember your JMPI exam. My JMPI exam, I just did what I was trained to do. I mean, I didn't overthink it. I didn't underthink it. I didn't panic. I was like, I know this, I think a lot of people too have a hard time trusting a sequence. When you teach it to them and they know it, but you got to trust it in here. You got to believe, okay, because if you start thinking, I need to find the deficiencies, I need to do this, I need to go faster, you're not going to go faster. You're actually going to go a lot slower. So if you just trust that sequence, we will get you through this test. But I think a lot of people, past experiences, dependent upon themselves, they just couldn't do it, which is why I used to tell a lot of the officers, the NCOs, because we're so hands-on and we're just taught that, you just got to trust this process and do it this way. But officers, they got that whole college thing where they studied their own way, kind of did things their own way, and some of those guys have a hard time adjusting to that JMPI exam. But yeah, I always felt for the commanders who were under the gun on that. And, we always knew we were always aware of the situation as instructor. Well, I was as a first sergeant. Sometimes I didn't pass it on to you instructors, but, I know who the guys were that were going into command, who needed to command, or, and it's obvious if they're a light colonel or colonels in the class, what he is, or you got a command sergeant major, or you got a first sergeant in that class, you know who they are. And, but again, that's what makes division unique. It's what makes us who we are, what we are, if you want to lead, then you got to do this. It's just the way it is. So, and we all did it. It's like you said, we once we all get through it, we all knew we went through it together, and you did the same thing I did. You made it in 5 minutes.
So I always, being on both sides of the curtain, like being a student and then being a black hat and then being away from it for so long, I'm so proud that the standard is the standard is the standard. And it was there before, it was there while I was there. You and I, we upheld the standard. Things were modified, obviously, right? The nomenclature might change and some of the equipment, this, that, and the other, but it's vital, I think, to being a good paratrooper, that the standard's important,
Yep, I agree.
So what does Professor Dan Bennett, spend his day doing other than dressing up in cool socks and stuff and, teaching physics on the weekdays,
When we were in, all we wore were those darn green wool socks, you know what I mean? And we had one BDU uniform that we wore for 20 years. These guys now, if you've been in 20 years right now, how many uniforms have you worn?
I know, it's crazy.
It's like every 4 or 5 years they change their uniform. I'm like, but I wore nothing but green, brown when I was in. And when I got out of the Army, I was like, you know what? I'm going to wear some colors. And I used to wear like purple socks and green socks before they become popular, and the students used to think they were cool because, back I used to just get colored socks and kind of match my shirt to it, and they always thought that was cool. Of course, now you got different crazy socks all the time, and they're actually in fashion. And people give them to me for presents and stuff all the time. That's what people ask me, where do you buy your socks? I'm like, I don't. Everybody gives them to me for my birthday and Christmas. I got 3 drawers full of socks, and I don't know. But this is a great job because it carries over from the advanced thermal school. I never thought, it goes back to me sitting in Acosta's office arguing with him about the fact that I don't want to be an instructor. I don't want anything to do with it. And then going through 30 days of tour training and then years on the platform, learning how to make people understand what you're teaching them. Because in the Army, you really got to get to a low level. I mean, but at the same time, maintaining, like you were talking about, that high standard and the complexity of what we're teaching you. Okay. When you teach CARP class to people, they just like blow their minds the first time they talk about it. But then once you get in there and start breaking it down to them, they understand it. And this is the same thing. I mean, I treat my classes like a platoon of privates. I walk in there and they just think it's the coolest thing on the planet. And the kids keep you young. The freshman class is always 18 years old. You're the only one that gets older. They're always 18. But yeah, it's a great job, and I love teaching. I just do. I can't imagine not teaching because I've always done it. I mean, it's what I've done the past 30 years of my life. Whether I'm teaching jumpmaster school or, applied statistics, it's all the same thing to me. And I enjoy doing it. It's something I can do for a while too, it's not requiring me to, do anything physical, but I enjoy it. I do. I just love it. And I'm glad I work at a great place. It's the same thing. The people make the place great. It's just like being a hat again. It always has. I run around here and joke with some of these guys, and some of them laugh with me. Some of them look at me like I'm crazy, but it's a good time.
Oh, it's amazing. So tell me about those that are proud of you and that you're proud of. I know you got an engineer, Tyler, right?
Yeah, my son, he's a great kid. Yeah, he graduated from NC State as an engineer, and he does software engineering. He actually works on Bragg. He works over at SOCOM headquarters, doing some stuff for them, and he does a great job. Very successful young man. Very, very, very proud of him. Yeah, I always tell people, people look at him and think, oh, they congratulate me all the time. Oh, you did a great job. You did a great. I'm like, no, man, he was easy. Okay. God gave me an easy one because he knew I'd have screwed it up. If I had to do some work, he'd have screwed it up. I tell people this story too. I kid you not. He was in 7th grade, so 12 years old. And I remember I was sitting in the kitchen when it happened, and he walks in and he goes, you know what, Dad, one day I'm going to be an electrical engineer. And when your middle school kid says that to you, you're like, okay, good for you, son. But you don't ever think that's going to happen. I mean, and then 12 years later, he's graduating from NC State as an electrical engineer. I mean, so he knew what he wanted to do at 12 years old. So I didn't have to help him figure it out. I didn't have to tell him how to do it. So, God made that one easy for me.
Part of what we're doing here is, getting your stories told as much as I can. And also, unfortunately or fortunately, preparing ahead of time for your memorial service,
Yeah.
I'm going to I know you've sent me some pictures. I would love it if you get me some more. I'm not sure about the count or whatever, but if you got any pictures in the slideshow, let me know. Before we get off of here, and I'm not saying we got to get off right now, I want to get you to salute and also call your unit to attention. I want you to salute and report, Private Bennett reports, think about, showing up, and then call your unit to attention. And then after it's over, then salute and say, sign out. Maybe First Sergeant Bennett, signing out or something like that.
Do I need to stand up?
You can stay seated. Just whatever you're comfortable with. Everybody does it different. I don't know. Just whatever. It's kind of weird, right? I get it.
I get you, man. It's your show. We'll do it. You gave me, hey, you gave me a cool T-shirt. Hey, this is a really good shirt, by the way.
Isn't it nice?
Okay. Yeah, they're soft, man. Anybody who out there is watching, you need to do the show just to score one of these shirts, because man, this thing is soft, man. It was good. I was expecting some of those old scratchy black hat T-shirts we used to wear.
remember we used to get the hats. You get the wrong hat, your hat would turn purple.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Okay, here you go. Sergeant Bennett reporting for duty. Battery, attention. Hey, I still got it on that one.
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I still got that. First Sergeant Bennett out.
Oh, yay! So that just brings chills every time I hear somebody. The big thing for me is to call them to attention. I just love that, man. I just love that, right?
I still sing cadence in the bathroom, man. When I'm showering, I still sing cadence. You know, I mean, yeah, I hope a lot. I hope there's nobody that I ever met in the military that thought, man, that Bennett guy, all he did was bitch about the Army. Because I loved it. Every minute of it I was in. I mean, I just did. I enjoyed every day. I hope I'm remembered as somebody who gave more than they took. You know what I mean? I just enjoyed it. You know, I tell my kids now, like in class, like every once in a while, I would get on a topic about a military or something, we're working a problem or something, and they're like, "Tell us something." I was like, you know what? If I died tomorrow, I'd be a happy man because I had a good run. I did. It was just amazing my entire time, and I didn't want to leave until I got hurt. I planned on being Sergeant Major of the world. But when I tore my knee up, I knew I was going to have to find something. And somebody told me one time too. They were like, everybody leaves the Army. Okay, whether you want to or not, you're going to leave the Army. So I put in, hurting my knee was a blessing in a sense that it helped me decide to get prepared to leave the Army. So that was a positive that actually came out of a big negative at that time.
Oh my gosh, I love it. So tell me a final closing story.
A final closing story?
Yeah, I don't know.
I'll tell you what, here's my worst jump in the 82nd Airborne.
Yeah, there we go. Let's hear it.
Worst jump. Okay, so this happened actually the first year I was in division. So, I got there in May, and I'm jumping, and I went to BNOC around July, I think it was, or whatever. So Thanksgiving is coming up. Okay. So I don't even think I got 10 jumps at this point. So I'm still trying to get jumps so I can get to jumpmaster school, because I'm a section chief and I'm not jumpmaster qualified, and I'm trying to get my jumps. So we have a C-130 for Wednesday night, TOT on Sicily, about 7:00, just as it gets dark. It's not a late night, okay, just as it's supposed to get dark. But it's the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving. So, our unit gets stuck with it. So we got a first lieutenant that's the airborne commander. Okay. We got a jump master team that's like a couple E5s and E6s, and me on the aircraft. And I got an Alice pack with me. Okay. Because I'm still trying to get my combat equipment jumps so I can go to jump master school. So everything I'm jumping, I got, no weapons, Hollywood for everybody else. Okay. But because it was Wednesday night before Thanksgiving, it was literally the jump master team. So an E5 and an E6, me an E6, the first lieutenant, and a plane load full of privates. So we're coming out through there. Everything's going fine. Those poor guys, I mean, the jump master team, there was only like 4 of them. The lieutenant, I don't think, was jump master qualified. So they literally JMPI'd an entire aircraft themselves. The good thing was it was 7:00 at night. So I got my rucksack and it's got my basic combat load in it. I got, I always carried a couple ponchos, my wet weather top, things like that. As soon as I exit the aircraft, it starts raining and we get parachutes just soaked. So we're assembling on the bleachers at Sicily, kind of tactical. I get in the middle and, point, have the kids start taking a knee. So DZSO, so we're marking off, we got copy of the manifest, we're marking kids off, so we can't find 2 kids. So DZSO goes looking for them. Long story short, it's about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning before we can leave this drop zone. We can't find these guys. It's Thanksgiving morning, okay? So we get back to, dropping everybody off and whatnot, and we go down to shakeout because we got to hang these parachutes because they're all wet. Well, can't nobody find the kid, the one Spec 4 who's got the key to the tower that hang these parachutes. So we're sitting there and everybody on Fort Bragg. So it's funny too, going to find out this kid's down at the Flaming Mug. The Flaming Mug has got something going on at 2 or 3 in the morning. So he's down there partying at the Flaming Mug. Okay. He's got the one key to the shakeout tower so we can hang these parachutes. I guess he scored or something that night. So he's at some chick's house, and this is his whole platoon, his whole chain of command is explaining this to us, So about 9 o'clock Thanksgiving morning, he finally shows up and we hang parachutes for about 4 hours because I had sent all the kids home. It was me, the 2 jump masters, staff sergeant. I think one of my drivers was like, "Hey, Sergeant Ben, I'll stay with you," or whatever. But we hung parachutes that whole Thanksgiving morning. But I'll never forget that, man. That was just the worst night ever.
Rain and wet, Thanksgiving, hanging parachutes.
Nobody planned on it raining as soon as we actually, if we, we could have just turned them in as normal, just dropped them off if it hadn't rained. But because it had rained, we had to hang them that night, as soon as we could. But yeah, I spent my first Thanksgiving at Fort Bragg hanging parachutes.
No turkey for you.
Crazy, man. I was exhausted when I got home. I was exhausted. I think I slept till next Monday morning, boy. I was just wore out. Wore out.
Oh my gosh. It is so good to catch up. You were such a mentor, such a hero of mine. Thank you so much for visiting with me. It's been an honor.
It's been an honor, Will. It's good to see you, man. You look good too.
Oh, I love you, man. You're the best. You're the best. Dan Bennett, everybody. I love you. Heroes I know.
Take care, buddy.